Hi, I'm Ferdy Serum, and I'd like to discuss with you how our mastery learning progressions in playing the changes connect transformative social emotional learning and the 21st century teaching and learning skills. First, it's important to think about mastery, moving from percentages to performances. There are some times when only mastery will do. For example, would you board a plane that could only reach 85% of takeoff speed? With a pilot who'd earned an A in everything except landing? Proficiency percentages won't cut it in critical situations. Mastery learning is organic and cyclical. Sometimes we're building agencies. At other times, we're expressing agency. The example I'm going to show shows how the 8 21st century teaching and learning skills can show up in projects I've recently done. It begins with self-direction, which I need in order to use technology for learning. And that allows me to make local and global connections. That's all the building agency part for my project. I have to use critical thinking to express agency in terms of creativity and innovation, and the way I do that with others is through communication and collaboration. So they could be at different places on the diagram and different order, but basically all 8 skills allow us to build and express agency. Let's see how that looks in the world of transformative social and emotional learning and 21st century CTL. The skills that we're looking at begin with curiosity, and that is the black area that you see that touches all of the other fingers. Next is identity, agency, belonging, problem solving together, and in FACES we add a 6th element, trust, because peer coaching is so important to us. This is what we're measuring. How does the gaining of competency in one domain influence the gaining of competencies in another? And below, you see the 8 skills that will be used in many, if not all, of these points at different times and in different combinations. So what you're going to see next is our method of measuring these things. What are we holding it up against? What is our framework? Our mastery learning progressions begin from the lowest level of experience and depth of knowledge to the highest. So you see at first, here's what it is to mean learning to learn. And at the next level, we're still building agency, we're at planning and example and managing our work. When we go to work for real in a team, we're planning a product and managing that work. And when we've made high quality products working on a team, we're now in the domain of mastery. Let's see how experience level and depth of knowledge actually interact. For a refresher, let's look at the new bloom. You may remember that remembering means retrieving knowledge from long-term memory, recognizing, recall, locating, or identify. Understanding deals with constructing meaning, clarifying, paraphrasing, representing, predicting, comparing, and contrasting. Applying is when we carry out or use a procedure in a given situation. Analyzing means breaking into constituent parts, determining how those parts relate, and differentiating between the relevant and the irrelevant. In evaluating, we're making judgments based on criteria, checking, detecting for inconsistencies or fallacies. And that leads us to creating, where we're reorganizing elements into new patterns and structures, generating, hypothesizing, designing, and producing. What's important to know is that all of these look different at different areas of depth of knowledge. And let's see what that means. At the recall level, we're looking at remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and a little bit of creating thrown in for brainstorming. At level 2, depth of knowledge, basic skills and concepts, it looks very similar. You may notice that at level 2, we're no longer focused on remembering, but in neither of them are we doing evaluation. That comes into play at the strategic thinking level. Again, there's no remembering at that level, but there is evaluation. And for extended thinking, just looking at it this way, it's really hard to tell the difference other than the numbers and the color. So let's see how these skills look at each of the areas. But it's important to know that right now, our current practices of teaching and learning are stuck at level 1 and 2. What employers are telling us we need are all 4 levels. So we have to come up with ways of measuring things that aren't currently being done. And that's the domain of the project-based learning, internships, work-based learning that we seek to have these measures for. So let's look at recall and reproduction. At level 1, we see remembering means recalling, observing, recognizing facts, principles, and properties. And understanding means describing and defining facts, details, terms, principles, and relationships. When we apply, we're using structure and rules to determine meaning when we're in ELA or calculating when we're in math. And we analyze to identify whether specific information is contained in the sources we're looking at, and our creating is brainstorming concepts or problems related to a topic. You could get an A doing this on recall and reproduction. When we move to basic skills and concepts, it's a little more rigorous. We're going to specify, explain, show relationships, explain why, and make inferences. We're going to use context to identify meaning and use information to solve problems. Our analysis will allow us to categorize, classify, compare materials and data based on criteria, and we're going to generate conjectures or hypotheses based on observations. The people who are graduating from school now, whether it's K-12 or college, are expected to know how to do all of these things, but it's not enough to succeed in the world of work. When we get to strategic thinking, we see that understanding here means being able to explain, generalize, or connect ideas using evidence and apply those concepts in a new context to solve non-routine problems. We're analyzing interrelationships among concepts, issues, and problems. And now evaluation comes in. We're citing evidence and developing logical arguments for our conjectures, and we're synthesizing information within one data set, source, or text. When we get to level 4, here the subtleties come in. Now we're explaining how concepts or ideas specifically relate to other domains. And we're looking at devising an approach or alternatives to solve a novel problem. We're analyzing multiple sources of evidence and multiple sources of information. We're evaluating the relevancy, accuracy, and completeness from multiple sources, and we're synthesizing information across multiple sources or text. So you can see that the work we're talking about now in terms of developing these assessments is at the extended thinking level. And these are the levels that are missing in most of the candidates that employers find, whether they're graduating from K-12 or from college. So now let's see how we put this together. You now know what the depth of knowledge is that you see at the bottom, 1 and 2. And for the experience levels, R1 and 2 are, this is something I've never heard about. It's new to me. Or I've done it once, but I don't do it routinely. When you're working in the lower left quadrant, you're demonstrating that you've learned how to learn, even on skills or competencies you know nothing about. Rather than seeing an experience level of 1 as a bad thing, what's important to know is how quickly you can move to higher levels of experience and deeper knowledge. When you develop and can apply strategies to learn what you need to know, working with coaches, researching, and practicing, your value as an employee and a team member goes up dramatically. Now when we move over to the right, in the lower right-hand quadrant, we're still building proficiency as we design examples we'll use to show that we can apply a specific skill or competency in the real world. That's where the project planning comes in. And that now allows us to move to the upper left-hand quadrant. You've now crossed over from proficiency into the early stages of mastery, where you use these skills routinely, and at level 4, you actually have examples of high-quality work using those competencies. And finally, when we're working in the upper right-hand quadrant, you've demonstrated mastery. You're providing a high-quality product using strategic and extended thinking. The speed with which you arrive at this level from your starting point and the stages that you pass through along the way define your effectiveness as a learner. So here's the flow. We're going from the lowest level, learning how to learn, to planning and managing work, making the products, and then finally making those products on teams. And when you've reached mastery, you then have the ability to coach people at earlier levels. Peer coaching is a vital part of our process. Understanding the interpersonal skills needed to be an effective coach goes far beyond mastery of subject area knowledge and skills. Our coaches qualify on both levels. In our communities of practice, we learn with and from each other. Coaches help people at earlier levels, which is how they gain evidence of performing at level 4 coaching. The candidates with validated coaching experience are in high demand, and this is how we're putting it together between transformative social emotional learning and the 21st century teaching and learning skills. Thanks a lot.